History is filled with tragedy. From the dawn of civilization, humanity has faced countless adversities. Wars, famines, and plagues have marked our past. These events have shaped the course of history, leaving scars that are still felt today. But can we pinpoint a single year? A year so terrible, so filled with suffering that it stands out as the worst? This is a question that historians and scholars have debated for years. It's a difficult question, a question with no easy answer. Each era has its own share of darkness and despair, but some years, some periods, leave a darker stain on our collective memory. These are the years that are remembered for their unparalleled suffering and hardship. One such year is 1919. This year stands out not just for a single event, but for a series of calamities that compounded the suffering of millions. 1919, a year that promised peace, instead delivered chaos. The end of World War I was supposed to bring relief, but it brought new challenges. The Great War had finally ended, but its shadow lingered. Millions lay dead, empires had crumbled, the world was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered reality. The world was a tinderbox primed for more conflict. Political instability and social unrest were rampant. Nations were struggling to rebuild, and the promise of peace seemed distant. And then, as if the war wasn't enough, a new threat emerged: the Spanish flu. This pandemic swept across the globe, claiming millions of lives. It was a silent killer, striking fear into the hearts of people everywhere. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and medical staff were stretched thin. The flu spared no one, affecting young and old, rich and poor alike. People wore masks and practiced social distancing, much like we do today. But the medical knowledge and resources were limited, making the fight against the flu even more challenging. The economic impact was devastating. Businesses closed and many people lost their jobs. The world was plunged into a deep recession, adding to the misery of the time. Social unrest was also on the rise. Protests and strikes became common as people demanded better living conditions and more rights. The fabric of society was being tested like never before. To make matters worse, natural disasters also struck in various parts of the world. Earthquakes, floods, and other calamities added to the suffering, making 1919 a year of unparalleled hardship. Yet amidst all this suffering, there were also stories of resilience and hope. People came together to support each other, showing incredible strength in the face of adversity. Communities worked tirelessly to rebuild and recover. The human spirit, though battered, was not broken. 1919 was a year of great suffering, but also a testament to the resilience of humanity. As we reflect on this year, we are reminded of the strength and perseverance that define us. History may be filled with tragedy, but it is also filled with stories of hope and resilience. By looking back at the worst years in history, we can learn valuable lessons. We can understand the importance of unity, compassion, and resilience in the face of adversity. And perhaps by remembering the past, we can build a better future. A future where we are better prepared to face challenges and where the worst years remain firmly in the past. The worst year in history may be a matter of debate, but the lessons we learn from it are timeless. The guns had fallen silent on the Western Front in November 1918. The armistice had brought an end to the brutal fighting that had ravaged Europe for 4 long years. Soldiers, weary and broken, began to return home, hoping to rebuild their lives and find some semblance of normalcy. But the echoes of war were far from over. But the world of 1919 was not a world at peace. The end of the Great War did not mean the end of conflict. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new era of turmoil and uncertainty. The streets of many cities were filled with unrest as people protested against the harsh conditions and the political instability that plagued their nations. It was a world in transition, a world struggling to rebuild itself from the ashes of a devastating war. The physical and emotional scars of the conflict were evident everywhere. Cities lay in ruins, and the task of reconstruction seemed insurmountable. Governments grappled with the enormous challenge of restoring order and providing for their citizens. In many ways, 1919 was simply a continuation of the violence and upheaval that had defined the previous 4 years. The war had ended, but the fighting had not. The social and political fabric of Europe had been torn apart. and the process of mending it was fraught with difficulty and danger. Civil wars raged across Europe. In countries like Russia, Spain and Hungary, internal conflicts erupted as different factions vied for power. These civil wars were brutal and bloody, leaving deep wounds that would take decades to heal. The Russian Revolution was in full swing. The Bolsheviks, having seized power in 1917, were now engaged in a fierce struggle to consolidate their control. The revolution had sparked a civil war that pitted the Red Army against the White Army, leading to widespread destruction and suffering. National borders were redrawn, creating new tensions and conflicts. The Treaty of Versailles and other peace agreements sought to reshape the map of Europe, but in doing so, they often sowed the seeds of future discord. New nations were born and old empires crumbled, leading to a volatile and uncertain geopolitical landscape. From Ireland to India, from Germany to China, violence and instability were the norm. In Ireland, the struggle for independence intensified, leading to a brutal conflict that would last for years. In India, the fight against British colonial rule gained momentum, with protests and uprisings becoming more frequent. Germany, reeling from defeat and economic hardship, saw the rise of extremist movements. In China, internal strife and foreign intervention created a chaotic and dangerous environment. The world was a powder keg, and the fuse had been lit. The events of 1919 set the stage for future conflicts and upheavals. The hope for lasting peace remained elusive as the world grappled with the complex and often violent aftermath of the Great War. The lessons of this tumultuous year would resonate for decades to come, shaping the course of history in profound and unpredictable ways. The First World War had left an indelible mark on the world. Millions of soldiers were dead, leaving behind countless grieving families. Millions more were wounded, many permanently disabled. The war had shattered economies and toppled empires. Europe, once the center of global power, was in ruins. The psychological scars of the war were just as deep. The horrors of trench warfare, the poison gas attacks, the sheer scale of the killing had left an entire generation traumatized. The world of 1919 was a world grappling with the trauma of the war, a world struggling to make sense of the senseless. Section 4. The Spanish Flu, a global pandemic. As if the aftermath of the war wasn't enough, 1919 brought a new horror, the Spanish flu. This pandemic was unlike anything the world had seen before. This deadly pandemic swept across the globe, spreading rapidly through communities and cities, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Infecting an estimated 500 million people, the Spanish flu reached every corner of the world, from bustling urban centers to remote rural areas. This staggering number represented about 1/3 of the world's population at the time, highlighting the sheer scale of the outbreak. The flu was particularly deadly, with a mortality rate that shocked medical professionals and the general public alike. Killing an estimated 50 to 100 million people, the Spanish flu's death toll was unprecedented, surpassing even the Black Death of the 14th century. More than the Black Death in the 14th century, the Spanish flu's impact was felt across generations, altering the course of history. The Spanish flu was a global catastrophe. It struck indiscriminately, killing young and old, rich and poor. It overwhelmed healthcare systems, pushing hospitals to their breaking points. The pandemic brought economies to their knees, causing widespread economic hardship and uncertainty. Businesses closed and unemployment soared as the world grappled with the crisis. The flu pandemic was a stark reminder of the fragility of human life. Families were torn apart and communities were left to mourn their losses. The interconnectedness of our world became painfully evident as the virus spread across borders with ease, showing that no one was truly safe from its reach. The Spanish flu changed the way we understood public health and disease prevention, leading to advancements in medical science and global health policies. In the aftermath, nations around the world began to invest more in healthcare infrastructure and research, hoping to prevent such a tragedy from occurring again. The lessons learned from the Spanish flu have shaped our responses to subsequent pandemics, including the recent COVID-19 outbreak. The echoes of the Spanish flu can still be felt today as we continue to navigate the challenges of global health crises. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of preparedness, cooperation, and resilience in the face of adversity. As we look back on the Spanish flu, we honor the memory of those who suffered and died, and we strive to build a healthier, more resilient world for future generations. The story of the Spanish flu is not just a tale of tragedy, but also one of progress and hope. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, humanity has the capacity to learn, adapt, and overcome. Section 5. Economic devastation and social unrest. The combined effects of the war and the flu pandemic had a devastating impact on the global economy. Production plummeted, trade collapsed, and unemployment soared. Governments struggled to cope with the crisis, leading to social unrest and political instability. In many parts of the world, 1919 was a year of strikes, riots, and revolutions. The war had shattered the old order, but a new one had yet to emerge. The world of 1919 was a world in flux, a world searching for a new equilibrium. It was a time of great uncertainty, a time when the future seemed bleak and uncertain.